All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this early session. This morning, we're going to be talking about building the digital backbone that's needed to accelerate delivery of cell therapies to patients. I'm Marcia Blackmoore. I'm VP of Customer Operations at L7 Informatics, and I'm joined by a number of our customers, current customers. I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your organizations.
Okay, great. So I'm Carolyn Lutzko, and I'm the Scientific Director of the Cell Manipulation Core Facility at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And we are the GMP facility for the Harvard system, where there's a number of different hospitals and academic groups that comprise this system. So although we are at a comprehensive cancer center, that is sort of our place in it. Our facility also has CDMO type operations where we will manufacture for non-academic, so a number of biotechs or even pharmas will use us for phase 1-2. So our cell manufacturing work is all really towards phase 1-2, a little bit of very small phase 3s are within our capability. But maybe one additional thing about our program is that we have really one of the busiest transplant centers in the United States. And so we have about 1,000 transplants a year that are a core business, as well as the novel manufacturing for cell and gene therapy products. I've worked in this area for a long time, multiple decades of really started in hematopoietic stem cell gene therapy for genetic disease and really morphed into the immune effector cell type work. So our portfolio encompasses all kinds of different things: CAR-Ts, NKs, stem cell gene therapies, induced pluripotent stem cells. So we're sort of a very diverse group in our program.
Thank you. Jason?
Good morning, Jason Bach, CEO, founder of CTMC. I think it's appropriate I'm sort of sitting in between these guys because we're a little bit of a hybrid organization. I have about 25 years experience in small, medium, and large-size biotech and biopharma. And about 5 years ago, started to be really interested in cell therapy. I was developing novel biologics and antibodies, but the cell therapy stuff was like curing cancer, but was really complicated to manufacture. And so I wanted to try and find some way of accelerating the field. And it seemed very much that so much of the innovation, and even I would say at those days, the manufacturing knowledge was at comprehensive cancer centers. That's a lot where it was derived from stem cell transplant groups who started with these minimally manipulated cells and then were going to more engineered products. And so I took a position and was recruited to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas. Started a novel group there to complement their academic GMP manufacturing with a more industrial-focused group, with the original intent to take researchers' projects and more industrialize them, bring them into the MD Anderson clinic, and then through to clinical studies. And so we were sort of an internal biotech for MD Anderson invented products. That was going very well. But then some biotech companies who were coming by were like, hey, can you work with us on this and that project? And so we developed a new business model to co-develop products with cell therapy biotech companies. And that really accelerated things where we could couple the process and analytical development, the manufacturing, as well as we had a regulatory group that could write pre-IND packages as well as IND packages and develop a regulatory strategy, and then run clinical studies at MD Anderson. And so we developed an entire business models around that. And that became so popular that we ended up spinning the group out of MD Anderson. That's when CTMC was born a little more than 3 years ago. Since then, we've partnered with biotech companies on 8 INDs. The group has grown to about 120 people now, and really is helping to reduce the overall capital cost of developing cell therapies, improving the speed and the quality. And a big part of that, I think, for us in the past, but really in the future, is digital infrastructure. So I'm really excited to be able to talk with you guys about that today.
Right. So, hello. Daniel Ramirez from Cellipont Bioservices. So I have close to 20 years of experience in biotechnology. I started in commercial manufacturing, so I'm kind of going backwards. So then I moved into the CDMO world. I've done biologics, plasmids, recombinant proteins, spent some time with viral vectors, and then I joined Cellipont. And since day one, I started to understand why cell therapy is cell therapy. You're so close to the patient, and your impact is so huge, which is, I've been falling in love slowly with the industry, and I don't think I can go back to any other biomodality right now. So Cellipont, what we are. So we are end-to-end manufacturer. End-to-end means that we take customers or clients from the very early phases, and we partner with them to get them to commercial. So Cellipont is a commercial, purposely built facility. So we have been, right now we're close to 120 employees, so a lot of growth over the couple of 2 years. We have a lot of variety on our clients. We have phase ones, we have phase twos, and now we're working on to getting the facility itself to a next level, partnering with a couple of customers that are going more into the phase 3 and commercial manufacturing. So working on the maturity plans for our digital systems, the quality maturation plan as well. So it's very interesting how strategically seated we are.
It's almost like there was a plan.
I think this was planned, definitely not by us. So anyhow, that's a little bit of what we do and what our goal in the industry is. So.
All right, thank you. So we've seen, over the years how transformative a number of the cell therapies, gene therapies have been in terms of patient outcomes. But there's still an issue of access, right, that we still need to solve in the industry. Jason, because you're the hybrid in the group, was there a moment when you realized that we needed to transform how we're working in order to accelerate delivery of those therapies?
It was interesting, Marcia. I distinctly remember this, and I have a lot shorter career in cell therapy than Carolyn does. So I thought cell therapies were pretty cool, like transformative. When I first joined MD Anderson, I went to a conference all about cell therapy. The very first talk was from Kite when they had just got their product approved. And like Carolyn has lived this on a day-to-day basis. But I come from the antibody field. And there, we focus on, 45 days to release a batch. For an entire clinical development program, we may be, the last BLA that we filed, we needed like 6, maybe 9 batches throughout the entire clinical development. And when I heard the gentleman from Kite talking about their program, how many batches they had produced, it was actually a relatively small number of patients that they treated to get commercial approval, like 75. So I was like, well, that's really interesting. But it was 75 batches too. And they talked so much about vein-to-vein time. And, in antibodies, we focus on release time and cycle time, but mostly from a business practice. We want our inventory to be well controlled. We want to release those batches. But when he was talking about the short vein-to-vein time, he was like, literally, the patients don't have time. And that, every day matters. Yeah. And so when you put all those together of you're trying to do very rapid release of individual batches, you're trying to make a lot of batches, you need to think about that differently. And whereas, in other modalities, we always wanted to move to digital systems, sometimes we could, but it was sort of a nice to have. To be honest, if you're producing 3, 5, 15 batches a year, you can manage that with an Excel table and track your data there. And if you have 45 days to release a batch, you can use paper batch records and move them around from desk to desk and get them released. But when you're trying to release like batches every single day in a very compressed timeline, you just have to think about it differently. And so for me, that was the like very early eye-opening that one of the things that we have to approach differently around cell therapy specifically is digital infrastructure, where it's not a nice to have, it's really a mandatory if we're gonna have any chance of scaling this.
Daniel, what did that look
Yeah,
like
I can
for you?
build that. I think looking from a different angle, I'm an operations person, so I think what's getting in the way of reaching out to patients is not the science itself, but efficiency. So the answer that we need to come up with is how can we reliably deliver? I think CDMOs are a worst case scenario where multi-product, multi-patient facilities with different life cycles throughout different drugs, different products. We're dealing with some deadly diseases like glioblastoma, where delivering these drugs is life or death for some patients, right? So building that infrastructure and being able to have a reliable quality output on those batches, it will help us to expedite, as Jason right mentioned, the delivery to patients. So I think we need to make sure that we have a plan in place, that we start looking into the maturation of our digital systems, how everything connects to each other. And I think we are talking about we want to go fast, but can we go fast? I think our systems are very fragile, especially when it comes to paper systems. How scalable is that? It's not, right? So I think from that angle, digitalization, as you well said, is a must-have of the industry.
Yeah.
And everything happens in such real time in cell therapy that
Yeah.
that you need access to that all sorts of information in real time. I mean, when we used to plan our monoclonal antibody scheduling, I remember we had this one guy who was in charge of scheduling, and he was famous for his, like, whatever, 11 by 17 printouts, and he would come to every meeting with this big printout, and that was the schedule for 18 months ahead, sometimes 24 months. And it was like, okay, we've got slots in, June of 2026, and some more in, November. June of 2026, I'm trying to plan next Wednesday what we're manufacturing. So you can't do that if you're like, oh, let's pull up the Excel chart and see where we are. You need access to data in real time.
Yeah.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I think, so early on in my career, we were doing sort of patient processing or manufacturing, and it was, small trials, and it would be sometimes enrollment of one patient a year, and there might be several of them, but the scale of that was manageable with paper. But there was a program that we worked on where it escalated. We had space and staff, but it escalated, and the products were not being delivered to patients in our hospital, but they were being shipped across the country. And once you got to 4 products a month just for that one trial, plus the scattered of others, the amount of time and effort, all of a sudden that balance of lab time, which is what we had always looked at, okay, it's this many people hours to do this and get it tested, et cetera, but all of a sudden the amount of resources and brain power that went into getting the products where they needed to go, and to the raw material in, right? Whether it's their tissue biopsies, apheresis products, et cetera, and then getting that back out just added so much more complexity that I think if you're going from A to Z, and there's so many different systems along that way, it's not scalable if they're not integrated as best you can.
So maybe building on that, what do you think is the biggest point of, friction that's leading to the delays or preventing acceleration?
So there's probably a couple of different things. So in our program, we do, some products are given fresh, and so that's for us the quickest.
Certain tests.
Absolutely, because if the tissue is collected there, in hours in our facility, manufactured for days, weeks, and back to the clinic, but not all. So I think that in a major academic center or a transplant center, you can do that locally, but you can't do that when you're going across. The times become proportionately longer. The analytics, right? If you're getting a raw material from across the country or over from Europe, the control of those processes, the standardization of, I think, the assays and other things to keep those moving in an efficient manner, just becomes a really much bigger part. I think I would say analytical is a big part, but I think the logistics of just the effort of tracking the chain of custody, the chain of identity along that whole spectrum, I think it takes way more effort than it needs to if you don't have the systems built to support it.
I had shivers when Carolyn was talking about real-time release and fresh infusion, because we do some of that, and it's hard to convey how intense that is when you have there's such a choreography that has to go on, as the patient has been lymphodepleted for several days, the culture is being harvested, you're doing some QC testing. We would have it broken out at a schedule every 10 minutes there was an update that went around to this entire team to get that product from harvesting and starting the process at 7 in the morning to getting it to the hospital in the patient's room by 3 o'clock in the afternoon for the infusion. And I think that brings up a little bit, what we can do, and I don't know whether we call it almost what we should do. Sometimes some products that we develop, we can do that. But what we have to move to as a field is focusing on scalability as early as we can, and creating enabling infrastructure like digital that enables us to do more things. So it's sort of a combination of those two. Developing things that are more robust and scalable, processes, analytics, and the like, moving to rapid sterility tests and those kind of things. But as well, putting in the infrastructure so that it enables us to be more flexible and nimble. I think those two things we have to balance. So it's not going to be one or the other. We're not going to, I think, I'll say this just because there's not many people here, and you probably won't remember me saying it. I think if we go too far to one extreme, one example of that is some of the allogeneic development that was oh, you know what? Autologous is too hard. Let's just do allogeneic. It's easier to scale, easier to manufacture. There's not as much real-time pressure. And what we found out over the last 5 years is it has all of those characteristics, except the cells don't persist in people and it doesn't work. And so we have to be careful of not over-indexing on, scalability and robustness of processes. We have to remember to make products that work in patients. It sounds trivial, but that's a really important thing that we have to take into account. On the other hand, it's the same thing. If we just have a product that oh, this works amazingly well, but we need, 50 people to manufacture one batch, and we can only do one batch a month or something, okay, we'll help one patient a month, which is good, but it's not really going to have the impact that we think cell therapy can for patients at large.
Absolutely. Daniel?
I actually going to go macro of that. I think one of the biggest challenges is, do we really understand patient journey? Do we really understand logistics? Do we really understand from a manufacturer side, what are the logistical nightmares that the clinical sites face? So I think we need to figure that out, because there's a real impact of cost of manufacturing, and I think the cost of these therapies are we need to work on that. It needs to be more accessible. And for autologous manufacturing especially, you have these one-to-one patient therapies. It is not sustainable. So understanding that patient journey, understanding what are those handover, and making sure that we start building efficiencies around the process. You mentioned the amount of resources that it requires a single therapy to be executed. So going around the logistical framework. Also, the added complexity for these therapies, and especially for a CDMO, from a CDMO perspective, is we work with different cell types, but we also work with tissue. Different life cycles for these manufacturing drugs. So coming with some framework where we start improving reliability, start improving delivery, maintain cost of goods low. I think that that's something that at a macro level we need to figure out as an industry. Yeah, single site manufacturing will face the same issues. Resources, move it around. You have a call from the clinical side, the patient is extremely sick, you need to manufacture ASAP. So the amount of effort and resources that takes pivoting, I think we need to be ready and build towards that, which will be our worst case scenario. Once we figure that out and we're able to reliably manufacturing drugs, being able to release fast and being able to predict that quality, I think the industry is going to start pivoting into a different phase. So I think we're still green from a maturity perspective in terms of do we really understand what that patient journey is. So mapping that out, I think, is going to be key.
So one of the things we want to focus on today is around how digitalization, building that backbone, can help accelerate the field. But I thought we could at least level set, right? Because I think we use the terms digitalization and digitization interchangeably. So maybe, Daniel, what I'd ask for you to do is just level set for the audience.
Yeah, these two, I was actually talking to my head of engineering, and she's a brilliant person, and we were just having a conversation around digital systems, maturity. We're looking into our whole infrastructure and how every single system connects to each other. Just having a philosophical conversation around those topics. And the digitization versus digitalization topic came on, right? So I think to understand digitization is, I think that's where 80% of the industry is right now, which is paper on glass batch records, right? That's which is using Excel's electronic dashboard. So it's just moving the paper data into an electronic system. Digitalization is more like the integration of all of these systems, having a single, the data flows within a single workflow through different processes. So it's that integration what we need to achieve. I was going to leave this statement for my final remarks, but I was reading ISP the other day, and at least only 3% of the biopharmaceutical industry is moving into Pharma 4.4 structure, which is fully automated, fully digitized. So I think as an industry, we need to move into increasing those numbers, because if we don't start integrating and looking into what that next phase maturity implementation of our digital systems is, we're going to be continue to struggle with having more resources, having logistical nightmares, and just getting far away from being predictable, which is what we want, right? We don't want excitement. We want boring manufacturing day to day, and anyone in the CDMO industry can relate to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, those are terrific points. You know, to give some examples of this digitalization and how important it is, not just for scalability, but for reducing costs. You know, one of the things that you can do when you have like smart batch records rather than paper on glass is like release by exception. You know, right now, you know, the way we go through it is operators go through the whole batch record, write out all the things they do. Then the manufacturing reviews every page of what can be like a 400-page batch record for each product. Then our quality group reviews those 400 pages, and then sometimes a partner quality group will review those 400 pages. That's a lot of people to review 400 pages on every single batch. And 98% of everything they review is perfectly fine. It's like, oh, check, 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 check. And so in this day and age where, ChatGPT and AI and all these things are everywhere, we've got to be able to get all of these, what I would call them like non-value added activities, like zeroed out or like automated and efficient. There's not much value in training somebody to like just check whether we filled out the date format right. To be honest, the right way to do it is have it be in the digital system, and you could only enter the date format the right way. Rather than like, do you know how many like times over the last 20 years, I'm sure Daniel, you've done too, like, okay, let's do the good documentation training. Get everyone into the room. Here's how you have to write the date. And still, like, it happens that people mistake that. And like, it's like a whole thing. It sounds so trivial. We spend way too much. I've added up all the minutes we spent, hours, days on getting date formats right. And so that's a trivial example. But if you multiply that again and again and again by these number of batches, it's a dramatic cost that doesn't add any value. I think that's what we can find is these basically non-value added activities that we can automate to reduce cost, save time, improve quality, and help get these products quicker to patients.
So maybe the perfect example to me of this is if you could think back 10 years to how, if you went to the doctor, how the system worked in terms of them taking the notes, submitting the test requests, right, for blood draws, for doing a variety of things, let alone in-hospital complexity of things getting where they needed to go, the drugs back on time. That integration, like of an epic system, and anybody who's worked in hospital systems, we hate it and we love it, but it allows you to order blood products, to get the Tylenol, to get the food. Everything is all integrated in there, and it's just a seamless way to look at the world. And being in a hospital system, there's components that we can see and integrate into, but it's nothing like it is when you go to your doctor or in the hospital, and all of those things are just embedded in the system. That efficiency is where we need to go.
That's a great example, Carol. And, I think it's empowering too for end users, for an organization, for individuals. Just like you said, it used to be, you would go to a doctor, they would do all those blood tests, and then they would call you a week, 2 weeks, however long later, and tell you, oh, this looked good, this looked bad, and you're just, okay.
And then go to a specialist
Go to
over
this
there. Yeah.
Now, on your phone, you pull up the MyChart Epic app,
Yeah.
and you know the results, and you send an email to your doctor like, well, what about this? I want to do this. And the doctor's like, oh, I haven't even seen the results yet. But it's so empowering for patients. And we want to do the same thing in the organization, make that data available so we can say, oh, wait, hey, there was an out of spec. Immediately it becomes like
Everyone's
apparent,
yeah.
and everyone sees it and can react to it in real time again, as opposed to, oh, somebody filled out this form, and then quality looked at it, and then they had a meeting, and then they, so that's what's so important about the digitalization. And I would even take it one step further. So that we gave some examples of being reactive or on the back end. But I think the real power of this digitalization is the ability to prevent errors from happening. Then that saves so much time. So, I gave the trivial example of the dates, but if you have all your materials barcoded and you need to scan them before you pull them into a particular process, you'll reduce to 0 the number of mix-ups you can have. Our worst case nightmare scenario is mix-ups, where we're processing many patient samples, and we do all this cumbersome things with space, like different incubators or different colored plates or things, so that people don't make mistakes. But if we can digitalize these systems, barcode it so that we can drive those errors to 0. So if you scan in that material and you try and bring it in a hood, it'll be like, that's the wrong patient. And the system, this is things that computers and systems can be much better than people at, so they won't make mistakes. that prevents, the preventing of mistakes is incredibly important as well. And when we integrate these systems so they talk to each other, we have our training database that has all the operators in there and what processes they're qualified to run on. When they go log into an EBR, electronic batch record, it should be like cross-check with the training database and like, hey, your training is out of date, you're not allowed to do that, rather than, oh, afterwards we catch it, or worse yet, an auditor catches it, like, wait a minute, this guy wasn't qualified at the end. Like, oh, well, he's done it a lot of times, and we write a memo, and da-da-da. But we can prevent these mistakes from happening. That also takes out a lot of cost and time from processes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned mixed ups. So going back to change of custody and change of identity,
Yeah.
right? So I think we can use a lot of, I like the word predictive, right? Predictive means you are ready. Predictive, you know what's going to happen. So from a COC, COI perspective, we have vein-to-vein COC, COI, but some companies only manage doc-to-doc COI, COC. So it would be awesome if we could be in a world where we understand the life cycle of that product throughout your facility. And I'm going to put an example. You can have a worst case scenario when you have 2 intermediates and then you have fresh leukapheresis. And then basically you have to track these 3 products within the facility and how everything moves. So it will be for the CDMO industry, especially, to be able to understand this patient comes here and automatically your COC, COI identify the segregation controls, the multi-lot processing controls that you need to have, predict the location for each of those. I'm going to put an example, a tumor sample extracted from a patient, right? We know it's going to be stored at minus 80 degrees, so or automatically the system understands the open capacity in your cold storage room and automatically assign predictively a location for that tumor, and then you can start tracking that without having the operator being able to, okay, we're gonna move the tumor from point A to point B because now it's in quarantine, so we need to release it, we're gonna move it to a warehouse, to a release warehouse. So having all of that automated, and maybe we can talk about AI and how machine learning can support building these processes. So the amount of resources that take not even the manufacturing portion, but just making sure the COC and COI is respected within the facility, I think is actually a very key example of how digitalization and all these new tools, GPT-based technology, can help us to get there.
Mm-hmm. And Caroline, what does building that digital backbone look like for an organization like DFCI, which is so complex? There are a number of systems. How does it change the way you work when you have those systems integrated and you have a flow of information throughout your connected systems?
So I think, we're in a situation where, there's embedded within the hospital system, so some things are currently there. External to our operations, right? So a lot of things are scheduled out there. Once, though, we're integrating that, it gets tricky because you have firewalls, because it's a hospital, and there's so many things, but you've got to build systems that can talk to or integrate back into already existing things, because we all have some systems that work well, but that talking back into existing ones so that you're not continually rebuilding everything, right? Mm-hmm. That you can use the parts that work. Maybe they'll be improved, but that integration is a challenge. I think the other part that is challenging is for us, so of whatever 800,000 transplants, let's say there's about a dozen different processes for those. That's a volume at which you can build technology and tools to support and all of those projects, like the product lifespan. The customized ones makes it a lot harder, and I think there's elements of that where I think that they can be standardized, and then there's some components of that which are not, right? You receive a product, that is pretty much a similar process. Samples are sent to testing lab A and B and C. So some of those are, whereas the actual, until if it's a phase 1, it's the first time it's being done, you don't want to build completely digital tools along the way, but you want to be able to take and build in some of the elements with some core that is not until it's, solidified. You won't get there. So I think it depends on what part of our operations, but I think there's a way to do it, at least for some parts of what we do in our doing right now in the short term, and bringing in some of those processes. I think for us, right now, the biggest thing is receipt and release of products, getting the sampling, right? Getting the samples sent, tested, and the results back integrated into, the actual electronic batch record. So I think there's a lot of things that are a step in the direction, but the complexity is making them work on a hospital firewall.
Are you guys integrated into Epic?
So yes,
Okay.
yeah, some things are.
Okay.
Yes. So the orders and like a number of things are.
Okay.
Some things are not.
Okay. How was that integration process?
So I wasn't there when the integration happened.
Okay.
So
That's why your head is still attached to your body.
That's about it. Yeah. So.
Okay. It's, and maybe Marcia could even comment on this. I mean, it still seems to me in this day and age when we're doing so many amazing things and AI and all these things, that getting these systems to talk to each other, it just seems so incredibly hard and complicated. And, well, maybe I'll just...
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry, good question back to
I
you.
can make that easier.
Nice one, Jason. So I think there are a few things that we could probably be thinking about, before we even embark on the digitalization journey. Just setting up a site, for example, and determining which pieces of equipment to incorporate in your process. Because I think sometimes we start an implementation, and we have a list of things that we need to integrate with, and then we find out later on that there's no way to do an API connection. So I think that planning ahead of time, being ready for making that leap, and thinking about whether your process is built to even accommodate the type of integration that you would need to have that flow of information. I think that advanced planning is...
That's a great point. I like that.
Is needed.
We think a lot about scalability and robustness and picking instrumentation that is enabled to do that. How is it going to scale? But I like that axis that you created of like, how is it also going to be digitally integrated? That's an interesting, lots of times those, I think, go together, automation and scalability and digital, but I think not always. And making sure that we are attuned to that part is a really good point.
Okay. So maybe the next question for you, Jason, because yesterday during the Science Slam, we were talking about not just the model that you've established at the Houston site, but also how that scales ex-US or to additional sites within the US. And so how does digitalization and building that infrastructure enable that sort of expansion?
So to reference that, last week we announced that we have a strategic collaboration with Albert Einstein Hospital in Brazil, one of the leading hospitals in the world, top 15 hospital. And we're going to be partnering with them to enable their cell therapy group to produce TILs in Latin America and treat patients there. And the partnership is comprehensive and long-term. So one aspect that they hope to eventually realize is a digital infrastructure that we're implementing in the Houston site and can eventually help set up as they build a larger cell therapy facility in São Paulo. And I think this is partly why digital will be required, not a nice to have, for scalability of cell therapies. Because as we think about scaling a particular product, even to multiple sites or to multiple countries, one of the hardest things to do is scale the knowledge and the people. And so I think And I think to keep those processes harmonized. There's one thing we really worry about is we have site-to-site transfers and things, and then different sites operating is drift. Everyone's like, oh, we see this problem and we fixed it this way. We saw this other problem, we fixed it this way. And somehow 3 years from now, you're running different processes. And so by having it's really important, and this is one thing we've talked about with the guys from Brazil as well as other partners, is having this digital infrastructure so that we're all running the same processes, actually running the same batch records, running the same methods, and all the data is integrated so that when there's a deviation in any of this is like a hub and spoke model. When there's a deviation in any process across the network, that'll be shared across the network, and the corrective action or the kappa will also be shared across the network. And I think that's really important as we talk about how do we increase access, how do we move to more decentralized. The biggest risk is that you have this drift and you're actually producing different products in different places. And so this is one way to keep that harmonization, share knowledge so that they can do that. And it's going to be really hard to have product or process experts at each one of these spokes in a network. But if you have a hub where all of that knowledge is concentrated and they get access to all that data that's coming in, they can then help those spoke sites through investigations, through appropriate kappas. And so that way we don't have to scale the knowledge. It doesn't have to be that every single site in the network becomes an expert on the process, because that's not practical.
And Daniel, maybe from a different perspective, coming from CDMO, what does that look like? Because in your case, your customers have slightly or very different processes, and how can you leverage that digital backbone to accelerate their development, their clinical development?
Yeah. So it comes down to, I'm going to take a step back. Years ago, I was part of an organization where they were growing very fast through acquisitions of different sites. So one of the biggest gaps that we faced during that time was the integration between the sites and lack of planning and moving into a single system. For example, you are working under a global corporation and you have two sites that have two ERP systems, right? So that becomes a logistical nightmare. Going down to CDMOs and cell therapy, is building the spine, right? Which is the backbone. Everything needs to be connected and talking to each other. So I think to be able to manage the logistical nightmares that cell therapy brings from a different type of equipment, the different type of cells, you have tissues manufacturing going on as well. You need to have that digital maturity plan in place. And I think planning what good looks like for organizations that operate at such a level of complexity is going to be the key to standardize, right? At the end of the day, we want standardization. We want systems that speak to each other. We want to make sure that we're very strategic at the type of partnerships that we go with, because a worst case scenario would be when you go and you strategically build systems, but once you get to that integration part, they don't talk to each other. And I think cell therapy, you have different pieces of equipment. You have the CliniMax Plus here. You have the ADVA machine there. So how everything becomes part of the same ecosystem, and how you are able to standardize that manufacturing workflow to be able to reliably and consistently and faster deliver these drugs to a patient. So I think from that standpoint, digitalization, it comes down to being predictable. And I keep going to that concept, but if any company have the goal in mind to get to that commercial phase, it's not about your product, it's also about your systems. What's your maturity plan? What is your digitalization strategy? And then from there, we can actually start thinking into more reliability and patient journey. So,
Carolyn?
So I have previously participated in multinational clinical trials. I'm not currently. But one of the things that, I think even across the US is I think going back to the logistics of the chain of identity, chain of custody. So if an apheresis is collected at a different site, if they have, I had one recently, they had an error, a digit error in their, in the birth date or one of the pieces of information. If it is not a standardized system, everything stops. They're on the other coast. Everything stops while it's all sorted out so that you can begin. If you can integrate, so we talked about chain of custody from your door to door, but I think it's from collection to infusion, right? It really is that. If you can build the system, like, ISBT labeling, that's an international effort where people actually came together and everyone groaned and moaned when we brought it in. But it works. And so I think if you can build that spine that goes from one end to the other, the efficiency, the reduced errors, the less deviation, the delays, and then in some places, it's expired, product's expired now because X happened. I think that is going to streamline, and that's only magnified across countries. I think that same type of system is critical.
So just going down this journey of building this infrastructure requires, not just a financial commitment from each of your companies, but also an investment of your people's time, right, to your subject matter experts and your IT teams and so on. But how does establishing this platform change the economics for cell therapy development? Is that initial investment paying off either in the medium or longer term? Of course, we're ensuring that we are shoring up, patient safety and improving quality. But from an economic perspective, what does that look like? What should that look like?
I think that's why I sort of started with, it's a necessity, not a nice to have, because you simply won't be able to scale therapies to have the impact that they can without all of the things we've talked about this morning, because you can't scale people. I think the easiest way I think about it is, with monoclonal antibodies, right? We could scale those because we could scale up. The number of people it takes to run like a 200-liter bioreactor is maybe let's just say 30. And the number of people it takes to run a 2,000-liter bioreactor is 35. So you get 10x more product for 10% more people. For cell therapy, if it takes you 30 people to make 10 batches, takes you 300 people to make 100 batches. Maybe it's 275, There's a little synergy and a little efficiency you can gain, but not that much. And so we need to bend that curve. What we need to do is, it doesn't take us 30 people, it takes us much less because we're not reviewing every line of a batch record. We've got computers to do that. We're learning, we're making many fewer mistakes, so we're not spending resources on investigations and figuring out what we did wrong because we didn't do it wrong in the first place, preventing mistakes. Those are going to be essential because we have to reduce the labor component of cell therapies in mass, from quality perspective, from QC testing, from manufacturing, from review, from tracing COI, COC. All of these elements, we need to shift from people doing this in the system to a system, a digital system to do this for us. it's going to be completely essential because you just can't scale people.
Yeah.
And I think an element that's related to that we probably won't have too much time to talk about is like automation and robotics to like physically start to replace people too, because we just can't have the flexibility, the nimbleness, like Daniel was talking about being able to change things. If it's, oh, we got to call George up and see if he can work late tonight because this, we have to, in as many places as we can, look for ways of getting people out of non-value-added activities and letting these really smart people that we have focus on the value-adding activities. How do we make these products more efficacious? How do we make them more robustly? How can we look at process design? How do we smartly implement corrective actions and things? That's where we need to spend people resources, not checking dates on every line of a batch record.
Thanks, Jason. Daniel?
It's simple. Cost of goods too high, margins too low. It's not sustainable. Not having the proper digital infrastructure will equate to rework. If I monetize the amount of hours that we spend on fixing and reacting versus planning and predicting, there's a large amount of cost that is associated with that. So what we do is, if we don't have the proper planning and strategy in place, is to throw people to the problems and fix it. That's not sustainable. As an industry, at the end of the day, who is the one suffering? The patients. So we need to make sure that as an industry, we lower the cost of these drugs. And that starts with the manufacturers. How can we be more efficient? How can we have better planning? I think the answer is not building bigger facilities. I think the answer is how are we utilizing our current capacity. I truly believe that AI and machine learning can help us by analyzing the data faster and more reliable. I do believe that being able to have that backbone is going to help us to just predict these inefficiencies. I think you can relate to this, but I've got calls on Thursday afternoon that you're receiving a tissue tomorrow, and you have to move the world to make sure that you have the proper capacity, the proper resources allocated, the materials released, etc. So what if we can use digital tools to predict all of that and give us the framework where we can just operate without having to rely too much on people and the planning that comes out of it. So I think the answer is we need to understand patient journey, and part of it is, are we delivering drugs that are easily accessible? No, it's not. The costs are just way too high.
Okay.
And the thing, it's a great point, yep. Every Thursday afternoon, I get one of those calls. So we need
that's usually Friday afternoon, a long weekend for us. 6 p.m.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
But there's some things that we can do to help that. We need to make it more efficient, the information flow. Because probably there were 4 calls before you got the call.
100%.
Of like, oh, this person and this person, and each one of those layers in a little bit of inefficiency, and so you lost maybe 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. That would be very helpful to have back if it was just more instantaneous or digital connected, and everyone would know this information in real time.
Yeah. Could I take this briefly from another perspective? I will say that the transition phase is challenging for anyone who's looking at that, because during that phase, your personnel, you haven't usually, we're never able to increase staffing. So you still have your workload plus the effort required for that. When you're onboarding even some of these shorter procedures that might be a thaw, calculate dose and give, or like something that is a few hours of work, it takes them longer at the beginning of implementing these. And so you're getting pushed back. In the long run, after they've done it tons or hundreds of times, in a good situation, it's the same amount of time, but it's the reduction in errors, that will get you there. So it's not always a smooth process. It's a much longer process to see those gains. But we're some time into this and in some modules and seeing some of the benefits to that, where others, we're just onboarding and we're getting all of the eye rolls and the oh my goodnesses and stuff from our staff. But I think we'll get there.
Yeah. No, it's a tremendous point. It'd be great if these systems had less activation energy, as we've talked about, to be able to implement them, because that would speed up adoption. If it wasn't so hard, we would do it a lot quicker and a lot earlier. But it is really hard. It takes a lot of different kind of resources than we're used to having in our organizations. And, reducing that activation energy. We were talking about the doctor who uses Epic and to write prescriptions now and how efficient that is, and like the script goes right to the pharmacy. But I remember, 5-10 years ago when the doctors were like fumbling and like trying to log into the system and everything. He's like, you know what, I forgot my password. I'm just gonna write it on my script pad. No one could read what he wrote anyways, but then he would hand it to you and you'd go to the pharmacy and like they would try and decode it and everything. But it was very quick and he could just whip it out and be done with it. So I think like Epic has gradually become better. Doctors have gotten more used to it. Everyone, has gotten more used to it. But whatever the suppliers of these systems can do to make these systems more accessible, reduce that activation energy and cost is a really important part of the overall ecosystem as well.
Absolutely. So we're nearing the end. I just want to get each of your perspectives on, just looking ahead in the next 3 years. What does best in class look like for a cell therapy organization? Maybe we start with you, Carolyn.
I think it is the connecting of the dots between the disparate systems that are already in place. So that's new building, but from identity, we've talked a lot about chains, inventory controls, set up into your manufacturing process, release process, and logistics. So I think you're sealing the junctions between each of these disparate activities to be, it won't be perfect in 3 years, far from it, but you're getting more of those integrated.
Yeah.
Jason?
I'll sort of zoom out a bit. I think in general, what it looks like is people focused on the value-adding activities and systems handling the sort of important but non-value-adding activities. I think if you take a snapshot of an organization, where are the people spending their time? That would be like, oh, we're coming up with new processes, we're finding ways of improving things, and systems are taking care of a lot of the back end and making sure that we don't make mistakes and things like that. So I think if you can sort of get a snapshot of the proportion of time that people are spending on, I'll just use this broad category of value-adding activities, that would be what I would say a successful organization looks like.
Okay. Daniel?
I would say I would love to see more companies adopting Pharma 4.0 concepts, being fully digitalized and automated, and more importantly, affordability for the patients. If we're not able to deliver these drugs to patients, we're failing as an industry. So best in class will mean having more access.
Absolutely.
Affordable access.
Affordable access.
Thank you so much for joining me in this panel, and thank you to the audience for coming here and spending this last hour with us. I hope that this conversation has, encouraged you or inspired you to either start your digitalization journey or to double down if you've already embarked on that journey. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.